Alright, today guys we are going to start some quiz review. Here is an optional video for you to work through some examples if you want. The first thing I am asked to do is write an equivalent equation in standard form. So I am looking at this equation right here. I notice that I've got a parentheses squared and a number on the outside. Well, standard form looks something like I've got y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So if I have a parentheses squared or two parentheses, I'm going to need to FOIL. So let's go ahead and first set that up to FOIL. So I'm going to rewrite this x plus 4 squared as x plus 4 times x plus 4. Instead of just squaring both of these pieces, then we lose what is going to end up being the middle term. So I FOIL my two parentheses. I've got x times x would give me x squared. X times 4 would give me plus 4x. I move on to this one. I do 4 times x. That would give me plus 4x again. And then I've got 4 times 4 plus 16. So I'm going to add any like terms before I distribute that -2. So I have -2 times x squared plus 8x, or 4 plus 4x, plus 16. The last thing I'm going to do is distribute that negative number in there, or that number on the outside, in after I've FOILed. So I end with -2x squared minus 16x minus 32. And that would be an equivalent equation in standard form. All right, another thing we're going to practice with is finding x and y intercepts. So my next question, find the x and y intercepts of this equation right here. Well, what do I know about x and y intercepts? With x intercepts, I know that y is 0. And with y intercepts, I know x is 0. So when I go to solve, I'll use that knowledge. So when I go to solve over here, I'm going to actually plug in 0 for y. So I've got 0 equals 4x minus 1 times x plus 3. And when I have a parentheses times a parentheses equals 0, to solve that, I'm going to set both of those parentheses equal to 0. I'm applying what we've talked about with the zero product property and when we were factoring. So I have 4x minus 1 equals 0. I have x plus 3 equals 0. I add this one to the other side. I get 4x equals 1. I divide by 4, divide by 4. We're going to end up with x equals 1/4. I go right here. All I need to do for the second piece is subtract a 3, subtract 3. I get x equals -3. But you guys know if they ask for intercepts, or the x-intercepts or the y-intercept, I need to write that as points. So I really have 1/4, 0 for my answer, and -3, 0 for my answer as well. Now that I have done the x-intercepts, I'm going to move on to the y-intercepts, and what's nice about y-intercepts is I just need to plug in for 0 and usually evaluate if I've got it in standard form or vertex form or factored form. So I've got 4 times 0 minus 1 and 0 plus 3. Notice I just plugged in 0 for the x spots in the parentheses. So I have y equals 0 minus 1 times 3, or y equals -1 times 3, or y ends up being -3, and that would make my y-intercept 0, -3. Notice with your y-intercept, x is 0. With your x-intercepts, the y value is 0. Okay, so that's x and y intercepts. Another kind of problem you could see is solve, and it looks something like this. Well, because I have a x squared and an x, I think I'm going to end up having to factor. If I just had like 3x squared plus 22 equals -7, I'd probably solve that by extracting the root or getting x squared by itself and square rooting. But because I have both those pieces, I'm going to want to factor. So the first thing I'm going to do is get everything on one side. So I have 3x squared plus 22x plus 7 equals 0. The reason I'm doing that is so when I get my factors, I can set it equal using the zero product property like we did up here. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of set up factors, and I'll have to check them. So first, in this first spot, I need factors of 3x squared. So factors of 3 are just 3 and 1, and factors of x squared are just x and x. So that makes that part pretty simple. In this second spot, though, I need factors of 7, but again, luckily for us, 7 is prime, so its only factors are 7 and 1. But I need to kind of think about placement, really. And remembering the properties of FOIL, I know that this 3 is going to get multiplied by both of these pieces right here. When I do it for this one, that'll give me that 3x squared term. When I do it here, that's going to kind of contribute to that middle term. So I'm thinking about where to maybe place my factors of 7. I'm going to try 7 here and 1 here. Again, it's nice to do a little check right here, so just a little check. Would that work out? From here, like we said, we'd get 3x squared. From 3x times 7, I'd get plus 21x. From 1 times x, I'd get plus 1x. From 1 times 7, I'd get plus 7. Hey, my middle ends up being 22x. I have factored that correctly. So I can go ahead and solve now. Now that I have my factors equal 0, like we talked about, I'm going to move them up here just so we can kind of focus on that part. I can set both of those parentheses equal 0 and solve. So I've got 3x plus 1 equals 0, and I've got x plus 7 equals 0. I subtract over this 1, I get 3x equals negative 1, I divide by 3, I get x equals negative 1/3. I subtract 7, I subtract 7, I get x equals negative 7. Ooh, the last time we did this, we wrote those as points. Should I do that right here? Well, they didn't ask for x-intercepts or y-intercepts, so they didn't ask me for points, so I'm not going to write them as points. I will leave it as x equals negative 1/3, or I could say my answer is x equals negative 1/3, and x equals negative 7.